I am getting tired of doing this. He is really heavy.
Let's continue the breakdown of my review from that clown who supports pedophilia.
Is this guy seriously trying to call anyone a clown while actively doing this stuff?
Hey, Mom, come see, this guy here, he killed himself because he watches modern anime. Yeah.
Not to mention that the accusation that he made at that start of his video was very wild, provided that he didn't give any justification for it. It seems that someone just got butthurt from my video response and has nothing else rather than ad-homing me.
The reason he thinks he can defend the show is because, like any relativist, he uses double standards.
That already completely proves that you don't have any basic grasp on what relativism even is about. Keep destroying your own credibility. Relativism is not about using whichever standards you want to judge art. Relativism precisely explicits the objectively correct idea that there are no objective standards in art. At no point was I using any standard to judge art precisely because there exists no objective way to do so. You can choose to subscribe to a certain standard in order to judge it, but your judgment will still not be objective but rather arbitrary. If I choose to judge art using a certain standard, I won't be able to arrive at any objective conclusion about the piece of media. Hence, there will be no contradictions, since you cannot arrive at opposite conclusions in the first place.
He mentions being in support and against both sides of the argument, thus whatever you say can be refuted by stating anything that suits him.
First off, based upon what quote visible on the screen can you determine that I am upholding two opposite positions about something? Because neither of them are used to arrive at an objective conclusion of morality, hence I cannot uphold two opposite positions at the same time. Second of all, your position does not even need to be refuted since you already start from an incorrect premise, that you can arrive at objective judgment of a piece of media. I don't even need to go through the reasons for your conclusion since it will be incorrect. The only reason why I am doing this video is because of the non-judgmental statements that you are making about the series regarding Rudius as a pedophile and certain actions that you describe in completely incorrect ways. I am only arguing against the objectively incorrect descriptions of the plot of the series, not against the judgments extracted from said descriptions, since none of them need to be refuted. Next time try to study about what you are going to talk about before doing so, because otherwise you will end up looking like a clown yourself, Gargamel.
Brings up the torture of the fairies by the pedo protagonist.
Let's address his constant name calling about the protagonist, since he still is triggered that the protagonist is not as great as Reinhardt from Legend of the Galactic Heroes. The only thing that you can really criticize Rudius for is sexual perversion, not for pedophilia. I have been through this argument over and over again, so I won't be copy-pasting all my thoughts. If you want to see a detailed analysis on why Rudius isn't a pedophile, you have this Twitter thread from Cloud Monkey analyzing this case. Rudius is, throughout the first season, just a child. The amount of information stored in his brain does not change that fact. Feel free to read my many exchanges with the Big Ice on Snob's channel to read a detailed rebuttal of this. They are very long, that is why I instead recommended to read that Twitter thread.
As evidence as to why I don't get how deep this sick power fantasy really is.
Feel free to state the exact opposite from the conclusion that was provided in my rebuttal of the review. That sure disproves a lot. Snob, you are as mediocre as it gets.
The torture they received is nothing much compared to what they do to each other back in their tribe. Therefore, what the pedo protagonist did to them does not constitute as torture.
That was not what I said. You can even check it on the screen. The reason why I said that it was not torture was because of the precise definition of the word torture, not because of the beast people being accustomed to that stuff. Though, I will say that it implies that the severe punishment that everyone talks about is not as severe as they make it to be. They are trying to project their own biases of morality onto people that do not conform to them.
And that would be true in their tribe. But this took place in a human society where such things are not allowed.
Snob, if two Muslims decide to decapitate other Muslim in a certain geographical position, you do consider that as murder and something to be criticized, but if they do so in other place it isn't something to be criticized. Talking about double standards. Either ways, the moral standards of modern society do not apply at all in this case. Precisely because this is not a clash of cultures. It is not as if a homosexual who has completely dissociated from the Islam is being thrown off of a rooftop because Muslims despise him. It is rather as if two Muslims receive the punishment that the Quran in which they believe tell them that they should receive. Not to mention that this is in no way comparable to Muslims throwing off people from a rooftop. The entire purpose of that part of my review was to disprove the absurd victim and perpetrator accusations towards this scene. Precisely because the amount of damage that Linnea and Presenza have been doing to the university and the people who live there up to that moment in time, on top of the crime of breaking an object that was not of their property, was considerably less than the punishment they received by Rudius. To sum up, The purpose of my argument was not to prove the fact that what Rudius did was morally right, but rather to put it into perspective considering the treatment beast people have with each other and the crimes committed by Linnea and Persina in the past. The objective was to determine whether this punishment was excessive or not, that's all. You can perfectly say that pedophiles deserve death despite killing people being something that is morally questionable. The exact same applies here.
It's the same thing as Muslim immigrants who do horrible things in Western countries. Just because it's normal to do horrible things to each other in the hellholes they came from, does not mean they are allowed to keep doing horrible things in developed countries.
I already addressed that example, but I want to make you pay attention to some stupid stuff that Triple Chin guy is saying. He is classifying whether something is moral or not according to law. He must have agreed to people having slaves in the past, it seems. His other point, still, does not make any sense. Precisely because it is not about Muslim people punishing someone for not following their same beliefs. It would rather be about someone who is not Muslim punishing two Muslims in such a way that it is consistent with their beliefs. It is obvious that you are going to reach wrong conclusions if you use wrong premises, my dear Gargamel.
Therefore it doesn't matter what is normal in their tribe. This is not their tribe. Torturing them is not normal and it is not allowed.
If you were to read my actual response, which you have conveniently put there on the screen for anyone to laugh about you out loud, you would see that whether it is acceptable or not does not have anything to do with its classification as torture. Not to mention that, still, the acceptability of a certain conduct inside a society has nothing to do with whether certain acts used as a punishment for others are on par with their crimes. You didn't even understand my argument, Mr. Triple Chin.
This would be very obvious to anyone if the show wasn't using double standards, which it does all the time.
It uses double standards so often that you couldn't even bring up a single example of it. Good job.
Because despite the human society not tolerating the bestial ways of the fairies, it also doesn't punish anyone for being a horrible person. It's why nobody got punished.
Snob might have discovered racism right there. Not to mention that a society having double standards, not the show itself, does not create any inconsistencies plot-wise. The Inquisition in the past would sentence you to death for burning a Bible, but they wouldn't condemn the soldiers of the kingdom raping natives from a zone they have conquered.
The pedo-protagonist got away with torture because it's normal in a completely different part of the world.
No. He got away with kidnapping, not torture, because that does not classify as torture, because no one told Ariel or the beast people that he did it. Otherwise, he would have had to deal with some consequences. It is almost as if the plot is trying to be consistent with the events that occurred. Legend of the Galacmid Heroes surely knows about that.
The fairies got away with bullying girls into giving their panties because, again, it's normal in a completely different part of the world.
This already proves my allegations about you not watching the chapters nor paying attention to the few ones you did watch. Feel free to pause the video and read this extract from the novel. They basically ran a gang in the school and the administration treated them with kid gloves because they did not want to piss off the beast people. Ariel put a partial end to it. People were so relieved when she put an end to the gang and all but Linnea and Persina were expelled. Ariel was able to become student council president out of the gratitude of the student body on her second year. That didn't stop them from bullying Zenoba and others. Most of this stuff was explained in the run-up to the fight in the LN. If they weren't expelled it was only because they were part of the beast royalty, nothing else. Ariel really wanted to get rid of them.
If it was acceptable in the school they are in, there wouldn't be girls complaining about getting bullied and having their underwear stolen.
Snob, you absolute buffoon, that attitude was not acceptable inside of the university at all. The problem is that if they were to punish both Linnea and Persina, they would have had to deal with trouble coming from the beast people. Did you watch the series with your eyes closed or something?
And the pedo-protagonist wouldn't be lightly scolded for having a bag full of stolen underwear.
Why would he be scolded for that if Linnea and Persina were the ones that set him up into this trap without Rudius asking them at any point to do that for him? This event was precisely about giving more understanding as to why Rudius stored Roxy's underwear in the first place. It was not for lewd reasons. Rudius literally thought about Roxy as a goddess, since she was the one who cured his social anxiety and aversion towards going outside. If Ariel didn't scold him it was because Linnea and Persina were the ones to blame. She already had a lot of problems with them in the past, so it was not hard for her to understand who the real culprits were. Even though that was obvious, she still couldn't do anything because they were the beast royalty. Your ability to ignore every single event in the plot just to try and confirm your inherent bias is astonishing.
It would be normal and nobody would complain.
His point basically boils down to, it was not normal since people complained, yet no one received any consequences. And, as explained before, it does not make any sense, because the two people who committed the panties crime cannot be scolded for it and Rudius shouldn't be scolded for it, since he was not the culprit.
This keeps happening over and over and over throughout the series, so there can never be negative repercussions in what is essentially a sick power fantasy about a pedophile getting away with being a horrible person.
If it truly were to happen over and over again, you wouldn't just have two examples of it which, oh surprise, were both invalid for your claim, Mr. Triple Chin. Not to mention that you claim there to be no consequences for Rudius' actions, after getting separated from Sylphie because his father was suspicious about the relationship between both, getting heavily scolded by Rudyard the time he got a child killed while they were completing one of the guild's orders, getting almost killed by Orsted because he had the great idea of talking about the man god openly with strangers despite all the red flags, ruining his relationship with Sarah after insulting her, losing both his father and his arm because of his weakness and many more. Finally, you keep repeating the claim of it being a power fantasy, but I won't take the time to go ahead and prove the opposite because it wouldn't be the correct thing to do in this case. You are the one in charge of proving his presumptions, I am not the one responsible of debunking them.
And forming a harem out of women who are fine with him cheating on them.
This is another claim that stems from not understanding absolutely anything about the plot of the series. Sylphie wasn't just okay with Rudius cheating on her. He expressly said that if Rudius were to cheat on her with a woman who he loves more than her, she would be severely hurt by this event. The only reason why she accepted Roxy was because she felt no envy towards her. From his perspective, she was a normal girl with nothing to be jealous of. Not to mention that Elinalise comforted her by telling her the truth, that Rudius equally loved them. Another reason is that she recognized Roxy's role as an emotional support for Rudius in situations in which she is absent to fulfill that role. If it wasn't for Roxy, Rudius would probably have died of starvation on his room back in the demon continent. You have lot of reasons, yet you choose to ignore each and every single one of them. Gargamel.
And that is how relativists use double standards to defend the show if they like it and condemn it if they don't.
Snob, do you perhaps have room temperature IQ? Relativists don't claim any form of standards. At least do a quick Google search before talking about stuff you don't have any knowledge about.
They deliberately never look at the actual evidence, or when they do, they pretend it doesn't exist and move on.
Totally not like you, who had to tergiversate the plot of the story to fulfill your obvious bias at least 11 times in a row here. Snob, the reason why I am making these videos is precisely to use evidence to show you wrong. You couldn't be more lost even if you actively attempted that.
Like a certain someone we know of.
He just assumes you know who he's talking about, like referring to other YouTubers by his pet nicknames of them with no explanation of who he's talking about.
Huh?
What part of calling out your obfuscation means using double standards?
I don't think that anime or art, he's lost me. He'll suddenly say something that I don't immediately realize he's just like kind of changed the subject, or he's like in a new paragraph, because there's no like setup for anything he says. It is not literally about being attracted to.
My brother in Christ, the fact that your videos don't have an ounce of structure, hence people skipping stuff over because the form in which you structure your points is terrible, is not other people's fault. Either ways, that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching.